Earth, Game of the Year edition by Robert Carnevale. Jack is depressed and discouraged at his dead-end job, life, and the world in general. As he's about to jump off a bridge and end it all, he gets a mysterious text from a 15-year-old named Rax, and that's when he learns that he's actually the main character in a very advanced video game. Thanks to some helpful hacking from Rax, Jack's life starts to get better, but as they both learn, it's not going to be quite that simple to fix all of Jack's problems. I thought the book was a lot of fun. I thought it was fast-paced and interesting, kept me reading, and to make it even more fun, I got to sit down with the author himself to talk about the book, his writing process, the publishing industry, a lot of interesting topics, so I'm going to put the timestamps in the description below. I'm also including links to this book and other of Robert's books in the description, so feel free to check them out. First question, do you go by Robert?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you say your last name?
Carnevale, like definitely pronounce the E at the end. No one does it except for like other Italians, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So do you ever watch The Simpsons?
A little bit, the earlier seasons, yeah.
Well, in the episode where Marge gets that new dress and she starts the highfalutin group, whatever, they drive way out to the middle of nowhere and they buy all this. It's like a knockoff electronics store, so there's like Sorny. Right. But one of them, the jokes I love in it is the Carnevale TV. It's funny.
And I'm not going to lie to you, those are all superior machines. But if you like to watch your TV, and I mean really watch it, you want the Carnevale. It features two-pronged wall plug, pre-molded hand grip well, durable outer casing to prevent fall apart.
Sold. You wrap it up, I'll start bringing in the penny.
Huh.
So you should check it out, just because it's your namesake. Background questions. I'm kind of curious what your background is.
It's nothing particularly special. Average white guy who grew up in suburbia America, like, you know what I mean? New Yorker for life. Yeah, like exactly. You get the gist. Like, you go to a small school that no one cares about, public school, rush through college as cost effectively as possible, meander into some writing jobs, do the real writing you care about at night, and then end up on a video call at the age of 25, not knowing what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's nothing wrong with that path.
It gets the job done, yeah.
Yeah, no, so you have a background in developing, if I remember right?
Like game development?
Yeah.
Well, okay, just to give the super brief rundown, most of my background in anything is journalism. So like my name's, I've written for Wired, Tom's Guide, all these big tech publications you've heard of where the word journalism gets thrown around a lot. It's glorified blogging for the most part, and let's not like besmirch good journalists' names. Like, I don't think Ronan Farrow appreciates people like us saying the word journalist. But anyway, so that's the bulk of my background, and the creative writing, like the novels and stuff. That's always been a nighttime thing, as it is for most authors. But yeah, just recently, I started branching out my narrative skills to small video game companies, like working with various indie studios to help spruce up their narratives, write mission scripts. And it got to a point where I was like, I'm severely limiting my applicability in that field by only doing writing when 90% of the work is coding and programming. So I decided to force myself to learn a little Unreal Engine. And in 4 weeks, I whipped up a tiny little experimental meta satire game called the Game Awards, and I put it on Steam. So yeah, for $4, you can see what 4 weeks in Unreal Engine looks like.
Wow, interesting. Ooh, okay. So I guess that I had to ask that question, but I guess that leads into what your book is about, because there's some tie in there. So how do you summarize your book to people?
Yeah, you'd think at this point in the game I would have a good one-sentence elevator pitch for it. Anyone who's a New Yorker, anyone who's played a video game, and anyone who's just not happy with the state of the world probably has a need to commiserate with someone, and if they can't find a human being to do that with, then my novel is probably the second best option. 80,000 words of just, I feel you.
Right. So because the plot itself is about that guy, and you called it lit RPG, which I am only sort of familiar with. I haven't read much, so yours is still like one of the first because I feel like it's a developing thing, but I'm not too in on that. What exactly is lit RPG anyway?
As far as I can tell, because I know just as much as you do, it seems to just be a fun little branding term that's been invented to delineate Dungeons and Dragons fan fiction from like actual. Uh, I don't even the first part of it. It's yeah, the D&D comparison is probably as close as I can get. Just the novelization of your average D&D campaign, which this isn't really. Honestly, this is just traditional science fiction. But if you put that branding on it, all of a sudden you get the attention of people who are predominantly gamers who have just kind of waded into the book universe of like reading for fun. So I try to like garner some extra attention that way. But it's more of a ploy. Although I think we both agree there's a lot of gaming appeal. Like if you are someone who plays games, the book's going to click maybe a bit more.
Right, right. Yeah, I can see that. So what inspired you to write it in the first place? What was the initial idea?
Well, at the beginning of every novel you'll ever read, it probably says something to the effect of all characters and scenarios in this book are fictional, they're not real. And I have that disclaimer too, because in the event I ever like work out as an author, I don't want anyone suing me for past stuff. But it's just proactivity. But anyway, so not real people, nothing in the book's real, but events very similar to the book's events and people very similar to the book's people inspired this. Just being alone in Manhattan at the age of 17, 18, that's, and just in the big publishing world, it was a zoo. And I met so many neurotic personalities that weren't the same kind of neurotic as me. So it was extra clash. And just that weird polarity of everyone around me being this like politically charged, angry, depressed personas of like 50 different flavors. It was a lot to juggle. And, I felt there was only one outlet. I had to somehow convey just how bizarre things were. So what was the original question? Did I stray from it or did I answer it directly?
Well, the original inspiration for
Oh,
what made you think of it. So yeah, that makes sense. So
yeah.
there wasn't a particular event or anything. It was just a general feeling from the setting.
Yeah, it was just a couple of weeks into that time in New York, by the way. That was my first and only time ever working in an office. So that was the only time that on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, I had to be surrounded by other people. Pretty introverted as a lot of writers are. But it was just so much to deal with that, yeah, as the weeks transpired, I needed a coping mechanism. And because it was an internship, they were not paying me nearly enough for proper therapy. So I was like, I gotta somehow express how I feel about these people without getting fired from the internship. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So
They were lovely, by the way. Make no mistake. The fictional characters, not. But the book, hmm.
okay, that's what I was about to ask. You have me wondering there.
No. Everything's fictional. There's not a lick of. It's like Norm Macdonald used to describe his memoir. He goes, it's called Not a Memoir. And he says, nothing in this book is fact, but it's all truth.
Uh, that's a good way to phrase it.
Mm.
Okay, so how long did it take you to write it all anyway?
It's funny. The actual the novel itself, the draft that ultimately went on to be the main thing, like a year maybe. And I wrote this again. This was in 2018, and then I let it sit for a bit, revised it a little bit, but not really. And then it was just most of the years spent were just trying to get a literary agent for it because I wanted this to be like one of the one of the big five is going to take this on. I was out of my mind. I was delusional. You mind if I go down memory lane just to kind of build up to why it took so long to get out?
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
hear it.
So excellent. So first manuscript I ever wrote was I think 2015. I don't know. I was 15 years old and I wrote this like 100,000 word young adult sci-fi story. Never going to see the light of day. It was a great first effort, but it's not going anywhere. The second one I wrote was this military science fiction novel, which as you may or may not know, not a lot of agents want to represent military science fiction, and most of the big names on Amazon and just book selling in general, like Richard Fox, these guys, they don't have agents. They self-publish the military sci-fi, and people can speculate, is it due to like anti-military conservative bias, or whatever the case may be? Is it just a niche? Point is, I couldn't get an agent, and I was very sad, but I did ultimately get a tiny publisher.
Ooh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, my second manuscript managed to get to print with a pretty snazzy cover. And then, so I knew I could do it at that point, which is why Earth felt like such a surefire thing, right? My prose was upgraded, my plotting and pacing through the roof. And furthermore, this was an authentic experience that I'd lived through. So I knew that it would come off as more genuine. The issue I had not expected is, well, within the first 4 pages of this book, we've got the main character referring to someone as neurodivergent, and not in a nice way. So, I mean, and that's the whole arc of the book. This is basically, the movie Joker is like the negative version of this same coin. This is what happens if he doesn't go the bad path by the end. The difference is that movie could only have gotten made because it had a giant DC character's name attached. But I don't think current industry trends would allow that film to be made otherwise, given the political climate.
Yeah.
So my book ran into that same issue. Agents are like technically proficient. You've clearly got a solid character arc going on here. The plotting makes sense, but the character's mean. The main character's mean. This is not a protagonist people are going to jive with. We can't sell this to publishers. And so, but I cared too much about it because obviously as a lived experience, I'm not just going to let a good story go to waste. So yeah, I forced it through myself. This is my one and only foray into self-publishing. And what a nightmare.
Wait, so wow, that's impressive. That's 100,000 words when you were 15?
Yeah, well, I mean, the word count itself is not, I think, the impressive thing. I mean, it's nice that, yeah, I could show that level of commitment and follow through. But I mean, anyone can write down garbage on a napkin for 4,000 hours and say, look at what I made. It's about having a cohesive narrative that I think is the bit that surprised me and impressed myself. Before that, when I was 14, I wrote a little, I think it's still on Amazon, actually. I wrote a novella just to see if I could do a long form thing. So there's this 40,000 word story on there called The Allegory of Stanley. And it's more or less, I've just been refining the same theme with, that was basically an unintentional test run for what ultimately became Earth. Because I was grappling with the same themes on a much smaller level, because suburbia in New York is not too much different than Manhattan. It's all still the same type of people. Just some of them are quieter and smaller, So yeah, that's the. It's been a long road, and now 25, I've got another manuscript cooking, and still nothing remarkable to show for it. But I don't know. It's nice to be able to hold these things,
Yeah. The tactile feeling of it all. Yeah.
Right, and the fact that it's polished and refined and like formally edited, and there's an air of like, if not Barnes and Noble level prestige, at least there's, hey, I've put out a quality work that stands at least to certain technical degrees head and shoulders above a lot of the self-published competition,
Yeah.
So,
Well, there you go.
Yeah, not to puff myself up. I'm sure anyone could read this and go like, what? But
Yeah. I think that happens with every book.
it's true.
But when I read the book, I thought you had an interesting writing style. You gave me an interesting comparable books with Ready Player One and Fight Club. And so I could definitely sense that. And Norm Macdonald was the third thing you said. So I definitely sense that reading it. One thing I thought was interesting was the way you use, and you alluded to this already, the modern day politics, politics of the office, politics of how the country is run. You have a lot of things to say about that you slight in the book. Is that I was trying to determine, is this more of a dissatisfaction with how things are talked about at such a low IQ level, or is it more of a more politically animated?
It's all of those things, as well as a critique of people who critique those things. So
Okay.
it's a lot of me mocking myself for being so irked by the state of the world and the people in it, as well as being irked with, people just not discussing things seriously, not taking things seriously, and being really callous and disingenuous with like most of the debates that go on. Like people who will defend Fox but go after CNN, people who go after CNN but defend Fox. It's like they're all part of the circus. It just changes the color of the clown nose you're wearing. You know, it's nuts how bombastic people are and how it just seems like a political discourse has replaced religious discourse, but it's the same level of fervor and just absolutely unhinged delusional behavior. And I don't know why people can't just take a step back. But furthermore, I also don't know why I am so fixated on it. Over the past couple of years, since I finally, since I was done writing this and then publishing it 5 years after the fact, which was just enough time for Ryan Reynolds to catch up to me with Free Guy. That really pissed me off. But I was publishing a couple months of that movie, even though I'd been cooking it for. After the fact, I Googled, and apparently the screenplay for Free Guy had been going on since 2016. So who was actually ahead? Who knows? But still irked. But yeah, so I tangented myself. But yeah, I'm not too fixated on politics. I'm more fixated on why people care so much and why people like me can't detach. Since then, I've gotten better at just ignoring it all. Like I've minimized my social media and stuff. But just to promote work, you still have to be engaged in like Facebook and whatnot. And then you just get hit with so much nonsense. It's very hard to disconnect from it all.
Now in the book, you make some reference to the year 2012. You see that as the year like things started really going off the rails?
I see that as the year that I started going off the rails and that the world around me stopped making sense. Like, think about it. 2012, you've got the United States is pretty happy by and large per capita. People seem pretty sane. No one's calling each other Nazis. No one's waving tiki torches in Charlottesville. Everyone's pretty chill. The Avengers comes out, the culmination of the good era of Marvel. The Dark Knight Rises comes out, Christopher Nolan, like all these nice conclusion things, artistically and politically, everything's just calm. And then 2013 comes around, and it just feels like the minute the Mayan calendar ended, everything just starts spiraling, and it's weird. I just feel like entropy's been increasing, at least in the United States, ever since then. For I can't tell the discernible reason. And I was becoming more acutely aware of how tense everything was. And so it might just be that I was growing as a person moving through adolescence, becoming more cognizant of the stresses that people are facing societally. But it also might just be that something's really, really wrong. As especially, I don't think anyone can argue that things got kind of out of control starting in 2016 is when like got really nutty, or at least 2015 in the build up to all that madness. So who knows? I just thought that it was a fun writing device to say, maybe this is it. Maybe there's an external factor at play here that no one can see.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Side note, I think that a lot of good points there. Man, if we had more time, we could jump into that too, which would be fun. Oh, I was curious about character inspirations. You talked about your office as inspiring a lot of that office scene. I have to be honest, because of the movie Free Guy, I was picturing Ryan Reynolds as the main character in this story. Yeah, I don't know. But that leads me to my other question. Did you have any casting in mind for some of these parts? Because I have pictures in my own head of like who could play who. Oh, I'll share with you one more before you jump in. The jerk boss. I was picturing either J.K. Simmons, I think is his name, the Spider-Man.
Yeah,
guy.
That's the guy.
And or the I can't remember, the doctor from Scrubs, the one of the Bobs from Office Space. You know the guy I'm talking about?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've never watched Scrubs.
I only watched enough to know that I like that one doctor. But most people know him more from Office Space. But anyway, yeah, something in that personality. Anyway, so yeah, what casting choices if this book were going to be made into a movie, who would you want to see?
Dude, that is such a good question. And it's going to haunt me that I didn't come with an answer prepared. Like for the manuscript I'm currently querying now, I have a very clear casting choice in my head. I'm like, oh, it's the guy from Reacher. That's the dude. He's the star. But for this thing, I don't know, man. Genuinely, because it's basically just a. Which one is the one that's written by you? Autobiography or biography? My brain is fried.
Oh, autobiography.
Right. So it's basically because it's that I kind of have to insert myself, but I know that I don't have the stage presence to pull off a feature movie. So I have no clue who would be the lead. And by the way, the real life bosses were not inspiration for this. They were all lovely. Every boss I've had in real life up until very recently has been an absolute delight. So that was me just trying to come up with a very clear antagonist to balance out my more critical views of people who maybe aren't overtly antagonistic. I wanted something for just readers to go, oh, that guy's the real problem. It's like, no, they're all the problem, but he's an easy one.
Yeah.
Yeah. As for casting, that's tough. I'd like what's the actress from Slumdog Millionaire? If I had to have someone for Angela, it'd be Frida Pinto. I think that's her name.
Is she
Um,
Latika, the main girl?
mhm.
Is the from Slumdog Millionaire, Latika, the main girl, the love interest of the story?
Oh, I don't know her character's name. I just know the actress. But yes, it would be the main love interest. I'm
Oh,
gonna Google her right now to make sure I'm saying. Yeah, it is Frida Pinto. Yes, that's we're
okay,
thinking of the
okay.
same person. So yeah, that would be Ange. I don't know who would be Jack. I don't know who would be the Office cast. That's a real tough one. I mean, if we wanted to be lazy and budget friendly, like Nick Offerman um, as the Jordan Peterson stand-in of The Office as Pritchard, maybe. But that's such a lazy ploy where it's like the TV friendly conservative character. So I wouldn't want Nick to be the guy.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would work for me.
Okay, kind of a non-answer for you. I bet you. Oh, you know who would make a great one for the Prague triplets? Any current cast member of SNL. Seriously, pluck any one of them, and there you go. You got three.
Oh,
Copy and paste. Yeah,
yeah.
there we go.
All right. I can see that. So you have, I guess, as a disclaimer on the book, there is sex and profanity, and it's not exactly intended for the family. But I like what you did with the sexual element because it seemed like you were using that as a tool to demonstrate that the guy is looking for purpose in his life and he's not finding it. Right? Would that be a fair characterization?
Well, just to make sure I'm fully understanding your question, what elements are you referring? Are you just referring to kind of the first third of the book where he's kind of fooling around in
Yeah.
Manhattan? Yeah. Um, yeah, that's definitely an element of it. I think there's also just the fact that a lot of men just have a primal drive that kind of haunts them throughout life, and it certainly distracts them from focusing on more noble tasks. At least it does for me. Like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Is just to grapple with just real world challenges, the day to day struggles of being a modern guy. I know most people don't really care about guy issues aren't top of the list when it comes to what the media wants to focus on, what most fiction works these days that get big platforms are focusing on. And then you get the oddball thing like Joker, where it's like it highlights mental illness and what one random white guy, what's going through his head. And it's like, oh, the movie's inciting violence. Let's all get angry about it. But like, you know what I mean? It's a rare day that someone just takes a step back, I think. So I was trying to just do that, and the sexual aspect's a part of it. Like, what is it like for that population of North America, especially someone in New York? What are they going through? That's all. But yeah, even by the end of it, he doesn't. His purpose is just it hasn't changed too radical, you know.
Ooh, no, I was kind of curious about that because it seems like he's like trying to find a purpose in the beginning, and then this, I guess we're getting into the spoiler kind of section of this, but then like it seems like he figures out he really cares about Ange, and that seems to be the motivating force from the middle to the end of the novel.
It's certainly a turning point, and he certainly cleans up a little bit, and that's the whole idea. It's just a traditional three-act structure, right? Midway through Act Two, the stakes either heighten or there's some dramatic shift in the narrative, and that is the shift of that. Yeah, she arrives, and it's time for him to start putting up or shutting up and being a dignified person in a world that is just baiting him to be as undignified as possible. So yeah, that's a thing, and sure, being good and being good to her and for and being the person that she wants to see is certainly, you could call that a purpose. I think he just stops resenting the fact that maybe life isn't inherently purposeful. I think that's the real takeaway, is that, when you wake up every day, it's a struggle for a lot of people to feed yourself, clothe yourself, get money, and come home. I mean, that basic routine is mind-numbing for a lot of people. So even if life's not purposeful, it's a real mind game you have to play with yourself to come to terms with that, maybe, and be calm with that. And that's really what I think the purpose is, just surviving.
So I sensed the shift in the middle that he was going more towards Ange. I wondered where the plot line with the office and Laura was going to go, because I thought I really enjoyed what you had with the issues that come up at work, and eventually he's the head guy, and like I thought that was kind of fun, like watching this this bizarre scene. He ends up being the top guy. I was waiting for them to come back in the end. Like, have you read the book Fight Club?
Yeah.
Like where they like you have the support group in the beginning of the book, and then at the end of the book they all show up and like they try to help him out. I was really picturing that at the end somewhere, just to loop in the circle.
As I understand the desire for a full circle, like all the elements from the beginning come together and it forms this nice cohesive loop. I do understand that. The point of moving away from that was just to show how, at least in my opinion, how trivial and meaningless things like office politics and just the day-to-day grind are, and how if you find a better thing to do with your life, if you find something that makes you feel genuinely alive, then all of that noise, all of that nonsense, it fails to be a part of your reality anymore. It no longer exists. And how maybe not caring about those things in the first place, Peter principle kicks in and you rise to the level of incompetence that you're at, which is how he stumbles into that job. And then he transcends it further by just ceasing to be a part of the job altogether. It's like, you know what I mean? He keeps rising past all of the petty elements of corporatocracy in America. And honestly, it's the book's kind of a crystal ball in that way. It forecasted my own ascension professionally. Like, I just started hating all of the journalism stuff I was doing more and more and more. And I keep rising to more prestigious ranks at better and better publications. And my attitude at each interview was just, take me or don't. I don't honestly care. I just want more money. I want a better excuse to be here. I don't have a reason. The love of God. And then I just kept climbing until now, finally, I just voluntarily abandoned my last position to go on art retreat and just write full time. And so I'm following the arc of Jack. You know what I mean? Life imitates art, as far as I'm concerned. So that's why I didn't come back. Although, I guess without spoiling, I don't know how to answer this. In a let's say there are 2 other manuscripts written and that there was a proper trilogy totally written for this. That just, I never bothered to publish the other 2. They would come back just as a cute little footnote at some point.
See, I was going to get to that too, since we're in the spoiler section, because you did. I felt like I wanted to know what was going to happen next, because I really did not see that end coming, because I thought he's going to end up in this other place, and then there's going to be the real Ange, and then it'll be, oh, they're together, isn't that great? And then she punches him. Like, wait a minute. So that's
he finds out that his whole life's been an illusion, and that the real version of the person, more so an illusion than it already was, right? Because it's still a video game. But yeah, he finds out he wasn't even with the real video game version of his beloved, and that life's about to get a whole lot worse. If he thought being in a video game with a apathetic god, for lack of a better word, was bad, then what happens when there's a malevolent one? Yeah, it's a real tough. Basically, once he's learned to overcome apathy, now he's faced with a new challenge, which is what happens when the world's not only, it's no longer indifferent to your plight, but it's actively antagonistic toward you. And that is, the second the whole trilogy is written. The other 2 manuscripts are completely written. And the second one is basically, they've been written for years. And the second one is basically at the finish line of editing. I just don't want to go through because this thing was not financially rewarding whatsoever. And time is precious, and I'd rather move on to original ideas that still have a shot at scoring an agent and the big publication platform. Because even Cold War, like, God bless the publisher who took it on. I adore them. Very small press, very limited advertising, very low returns, Yeah. So I'd like to keep taking shots at something giant that can retroactively get my other work attention. So that's why I haven't bothered with the other two, but they are written and they do continue that. The second book is all about, what happens when you find the will to live and all of a sudden life is actively trying to stop you. And then the third one, just to summarize it in a sentence, what does it matter if you make something great if there's no one around to see it? Those are the themes to encompass it, and they all tie together. The third one I'm not quite happy with, but the second one's more or less ready for me to hire a freelance cover artist and then hit publish.
Wow, cool. I feel a lot better now because it ends with this hopelessness is the word that jumps to mind. Kind of a desperation that I just, again, did not see coming.
That's your takeaway? That's how you feel about it? I mean, this is a genuine curiosity. You felt it was hopeless at the end?
I felt like he was devoting himself to a probable fruitless search just for the sake of devoting himself to something. That was my conclusion.
I like that. That's interesting. By all means, all conclusions are welcome. I like that. And if you, for your own personal, if you ever want the second one, like the not completely polished manuscript just for your own reading, by all means, I'll toss it over.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I'd be curious. But the other thing that really threw me off that I was predicting, and I felt pretty good about this prediction, that John was going to end up being Barry. I thought, this is perfect. You got the two kids. You have this weird guy that's after the main character. It's going to be Barry, like in his computer, and he, like Barry, what are you doing? I thought, like, oh, this is perfect. I love it.
So was the speculation there that you just assumed Barry would be secretly resentful of Rax, and this was his way to just ruin his fun?
Yeah, I thought that was perfect.
That's awesome. That's certainly fun. Yeah, that maybe I'll just say that didn't occur to me. I wasn't smart enough to cook that up. That's why it's not there. Otherwise, it would have been.
Yeah, it's funny. No, I like what you did with it too, but it's just it's fun when you have an idea that may or may not get used by the author, but it's fun.
Oh, for sure, and that's awesome. I love to hear that you were cooking up theories, especially ones that are very plausible. That's not outlandish at all. That's perfect. It totally makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So it was never on the table then.
It was never on the table, and Barry shows up in the other two, and he's just, this is a minute spoiler to the degree that who would actually care. He remains a good friend throughout. Obviously, he and Rax have their differences, but it's just they're two young men who just have a good brotherly friendship, and it's that simple for them. Yeah, through and through.
Interesting. Well, that brings up another question I had. Were there multiple in the way that the story changed as you were writing it? Were there different endings you had in mind, different story elements? How true to your original idea is the final product here?
Funny enough, it's basically one for one. When I said I did revisions and stuff, that was mainly just line level editing. But developmentally speaking, I almost never have to do major revisions. That very first manuscript I told you about when I was 15, that thing it was a very grand universe, and it had little plot holes crop up after the fact. And that's when I understood the importance of having a solid foundation before you start writing. But ever since then, my outlines have been rock solid, absolutely airtight. For example, this thing, the very second manuscript ever first published, the only developmental change I ever did was I took out a single flashback chapter. But otherwise, it's the first draft with some heavy line editing just for technical polish. And then Earth, it's one for one basically with the original. And all the stuff that's currently with agents right now being read, it's the first draft. Just again, And it's all because I just make sure the outline is really tight. Like, I have a 20-page planning document that's just every chapter, it has to have an arc, it has to have these structural elements. And if you get that, then everything else writes itself.
Ah, well, that's good insight into the writing process. Interesting.
Yeah, and obviously, like, I don't have a New York Times bestseller to show for it, so maybe I'm full of it. Maybe I'm just BSing my way. But I genuinely, just the amount of interest I've gotten over the course of all these books, it's like I'm doing something right of some sort. So I don't think people need to, beat themselves up and do a million drafts. Sometimes, if you've done your homework and you've prepped adequately, the first time's the best time. And I'm pretty sure Stephen King hasn't he said the exact same thing, that he works with first drafts and he just uses those? Like, even since inception, not just now that he's big enough that he could like sell toilet paper. But yeah, anyway.
I do like watching interviews about Stephen King, and I read his On Writing book. I'm trying to think what he said in particular. I know actually what I remember from him is the rule that he always followed, going back to a lesson that he got when he was younger, was final draft equals first draft minus 10%. So he writes a whole bunch.
That's exactly the math that mine's boiled down to. Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. It's the first draft, and then I shave down the word count till it's about 90% of what it was, and then maybe I'm on the same frequency then.
Well, I think that's a good frequency to be on. So
it's nice if you don't have any major issues, because, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of nuts to go in unprepared and have to do multiple drafts, because that's time you could be using on your next manuscript.
Yeah, that's true. You have to use time economically. So
yeah.
Oh, I did want to bring up your prose style. I really liked your technique. I'm trying to think of how to describe it exactly. I think reading a book for me a lot of time is like watching figure skating, when you see the figure skater go up for that triple axel and then stick the landing. Like, it feels just so good. And I think in a lot of parts in your book, like, you end a paragraph and it feels the same way. Yeah, that was a good way to phrase that. So anyway, yeah, I was impressed.
I'm flattered, and thank you for that. I do pride myself on knowing how to end a chapter, end a paragraph, end something with a nice, smooth sense of oomph, nice impact. But yeah, my prose style's, honestly, I feel like it's kind of a detriment, in the sense that it to a lot of people, it's a blunt hammer, whereas a lot of literary enthusiasts want a surgical scalpel. They don't like me hitting them in the face with stuff. And it's kind of the inverse of Quentin Tarantino. He mentioned that he writes his screenplays as though they were novels. I try to write my novels as though they're screenplays. So maybe it's a little too on the nose. But if you liked it, hey, that's all that, honestly, that's what matters to me. And the reviewers liked it. So maybe I'm doing all right.
Yeah. Well, I tend to be annoyed with the people who say they're like, the writing has to be a certain way. Just in general, writing with the blunt instrument, like that can be an interesting style.
Yeah, it's high impact, if nothing else. Like, there's no mystery as to how the author's feeling or how a character's feeling.
Yeah. So I don't know. Works for me.
I appreciate it. That's a vote of confidence for the future that I will take.
Yeah, happy to help.
May I have the honor of plugging just one more thing?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. Since I've got it here, in between novels, as I was getting a bit distraught with having to textually depict everything and spend months of my life staring at a Word doc and just hope to God that someday it gets out there, I decided to take a break and illustrate and write a comic book, Monster of America. So, yeah.
I remember that from your website.
There you go. So, yeah, this got picked up by the same small publisher that did Cold War. They wanted to experiment with a comic/graphic novel, and I had a 60-page story on my hands. So they thought, why not? Let me just pull up the art style, black and white.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I've got on the table right now. But I wanted to put that out there because, I don't know, kind of branch out. You don't want to be known for just writing. Like, you know what I mean? Billions of people can write. That's not terribly unique. But being able to illustrate as well. It narrows down the talent pool.
Wow, that's cool. And actually, that reminds me of another question that I had, but I didn't write down. Um, I guess number one, what are the kind of sticking just to books, since you talk about like writing the books you want to write, what is your ideal kind of book that is your style? What's your ideal there?
All right. Well, I have a narcissistic answer and I have a more palatable answer, so I'll give both. Narcissistically speaking, the ideal kind of book is the kind that I write. I solely write because I feel like young men don't have a lot of options on the market right now. Statistically, I think between the big five, there was some study, and I don't have the literature on me. So if anyone wants to call me out for fake info, by all means. But statistically, young adult books published by the big five, 83% of them, as of 2020, have female protagonists. So I just feel like young men don't have a lot of options right now on the table. You know, for every one Maze Runner, you've got a zillion Hunger Games, Divergent, Twilights. And so I'm trying to write the book that doesn't exist, the story for young men that just makes them feel a little more seen and heard and gives them an incentive to read, since stories that are written for young men are going to have different thematic elements and different focuses than ones that are written for young women. So I'm just trying to write something that's not out there. As for books that are out there that I enjoy, that inspire me, like I said, Norm Macdonald's bizarre, fictitious memoir is definitely one of them. Fight Club, which is, again, that deals with men's issues top to bottom. Ready Player One, that's blatant male wish fulfillment. So I'm not sure if it's as complex as I would appreciate, but it's certainly, it's nice comfort food. It's a nice thing for young men who feel a little disenfranchised and lonely. It's a nice way to cope. Those are nice. I like nonfiction primarily at this point, which is ironic. I really don't read fiction at this point, even though that's all I write. But like Tokyo Vice is probably the last book I read, and that's fun because it sounds like fiction, and a lot of people have disputed the author's claims of what events actually transpired in real life. So maybe it is fiction, but either way, I like those stories, and they're all male authors, just dealing with things that guys care about. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
But you say your ideal is beyond just writing. So would so it would be paired with the illustrating like you did with what you showed me there?
No. Illustrating is far too time consuming. Like this right here, this was an experiment just because I've been doodling in math notebooks since I was like 8. But but no, ideally I would be writing, but I would have enough external validation, you know what I mean? Thousands of reviews, millions of dollars with which to fuel me forward. It's when you've hit enough minor successes that just aren't big enough to actually change your life, it feels like you're doing something wrong and you want to change of pace, which is why I've been branching out into game development to pair with my writing skills, comics to pair with my writing skills. And comics are, let's not kid ourselves, they're a dying field, a dying medium. So kind of similarly to print books, I'm choosing the worst possible avenues to monetize myself. But that's why the game thing was. It was like, what's the nice in between where I like it and it's also lucrative. So yeah, it's all just various experiments. If I could have my way, though, it'd be novels till I die, and then retain the film rights and get that screenplay credit.
Huh. Okay. So you mentioned male-driven novels would be a theme. I got the sense of a sort of bluntness, action-packed sort of stories. Would that be fair to say as well?
Yeah, I'd like to think that I don't dawdle. I pair every paragraph that's about feelings and thoughts and emotions with a paragraph that's things happening. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I thought the story moved, so
That's
mission
by
accomplished
design. I appreciate that. And yeah, just to refine that earlier thought, well, my stories do inherently have a male focus. I am deliberately trying to branch out from that to be a little more palatable. And it's going, the manuscript that's in agent limbo right now, like they're reading the full thing, a couple of them, and are assessing it. That's it's still a male protagonist, but it's a theme that's a little more. It's about loneliness, and I think everybody can get behind that. So maybe that will connect with more people. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to appeal to everybody, but you can't do that. It's the whole you can't get everyone all the time.
Right. Right. Yeah. Sometimes you pick the audience. Go for
Exactly.
that.
Even if the audience is just yourself and you're basically publishing a diary to whoever will read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about the tendency in the publishing industry of books kind of being the same. Would you like, is that fair to say? And would you say it's getting worse? Because I have a similar feeling myself.
I think personally, based on my own experience, not only is it getting worse, but furthermore, one agent who had the current manuscript that's in limbo right now, one agent who requested the full just sent me a rejection note saying, because the novel is experimental metafiction, which is probably the dumbest possible thing I could do in the current publishing climate, but it spoke to me, so I thought, why not? They responded with me saying, like, hey, this is not cleanly commercial. This is not cleanly literary. This is not homogenous to either camp. Yours exists in the equatorial line between the two poles. I don't want to put in the effort to try to sell this. It's too niche. It's not happening. And they didn't explicitly say that they didn't know how to sell it, but I almost got that impression where they're like, they just don't want to bark up the tree, no matter how much they like the story, right? Enough to read the entire thing top to bottom. They just know where to place it. And it's like, that's proof that, yeah, things are getting, and the kicker is that's, I think, my most palatable story yet. This experimental metafiction work is ironically probably the most consumer friendly thing I've written thus far, more so than a generic space sci-fi shoot 'em up story or Earth, which is just Joker minus Joaquin Phoenix and the DC branding. I've finally written something that I thought was very friendly. There's no hard language in it. It's very just, it's philosophical, but in like a fun, actiony way. And even that's like no go because it's just not extraordinarily linear in the path it takes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a general problem. So what do you think the solution is? Like is just self-publishing going to start taking over traditional publishing, because people can do whatever they want?
That I'm gonna be honest. Oh, I almost said a bad word. I've been doing so good about not doing that, so you don't have to do any editing. I was about to just no. I don't think we can kid ourselves. For every one self-published author who's like raking in a living wage, who says, "Oh yeah, we're replacing traditional publishing," there are a million people on Amazon who've done the exact same thing and are failing miserably. Who have made $3 in a year if they're lucky on royalties. So no, I don't. For every Chris Fox and Richard Fox and all of these big names in the self-publishing realm, there are so many statistically failing. Whereas look at the authors who are traditionally published. Yeah, there are giant, colossal misfires wherein royalties are abysmal, but statistically, the gap between the winners and the losers in traditional publishing is a lot smaller, just because they have an industry's worth of backing behind them. So at the same time, the window for what traditional publishing seems to be willing to accept is so tight, and it keeps getting tighter and tighter that it's almost forcing more talent to go into self-publishing. So I don't know what the solution is. I'm not going to pretend I'm a wizard who sees the macro, but I will say that there's an element of chicken or egg that really irks me about the whole thing, and that is publishers and agents, as I've seen firsthand, and editors, they like to pretend as though the market dictates everything, right? It's a buyer's market. There is an inverse reality that people need to consider, which is that readers only have what publishers will feed them. If publishers are committed to taking the path of least resistance every single time with the most broad, commercially palatable thing, then there will never be an audience developed for anything else. People only get what is force-fed to them. And if publishers really wanted to take a risk and say, no, reader base, you will like this because this is what we're printing this year, and your option is go without fiction, write your own fiction, which is what I ended up having to do, or read what we're publishing. if they did that more often and just took a couple more gambles here and there, you know what I mean? Let's not pretend like, Spare, the book about Prince Harry.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's not pretend like they don't have the money. Like, you could fund 1,000 tiny, obscure literary novels with that money that was used for that book to pay off Prince Harry. And statistically, one of those 1,000 books is going to make returns that balance out all the other wasted money. So I think publishers, a big responsibility is on them to just stop being so ridiculously pandering. And people say the same thing of Hollywood studios, and every artist is going to say the same thing. But I don't know. I'm not a money head, clearly, and I refuse to write for audiences, which is probably part of the problem. I don't like writing for what is commercially palatable. So I don't know. They're the ones keeping bread on the table. I'm not. So yeah, I'm not the expert.
Okay. Yeah, but you do have some hands-on experience, which I find interesting. From an outside perspective, it seems, and I think the same thing with movies, that movies are getting more homogenous and less interesting to me every single year. And I think like a similar thing is happening with books. It's like we keep putting out the same safe stuff. So it makes me wonder, like, where's this headed in like 20 years, 40 years? Are we just gonna get is it gonna get more of the same? Like, it doesn't seem sustainable to me.
Right. It's either going to get so small. There's a quote from Alan Wake 2, a video game. It's the final quote of the game, and that game is about an author, a struggling author, who's literally trapped in his own head. And the ending quote of that game sums it all up really well. It's not a loop, it's a spiral. So maybe, just maybe, yeah, we're headed towards some sort of implosion where, Penguin Random House and HarperCollins, they're like, oh my God, we've published the same book 43 million times in the past 5 years, and we can't keep the lights on. That would be pretty cool, actually, if they blew up. But alternatively, it's either that, it's either a revitalization happens after things fall apart, or people just accept it, and George Orwell was right the whole time. And I avoided the movie comparison on purpose because I didn't want to have to mention like Warner Bros. And Blue Beetle and just how they've been battering the DC brand to the point where the market rejects their superhero movies now. Because that's a really good argument for the counter camp, which says, hey, no, look, the market does control things. Look at how they rejected these giant movies and have like tanked the studios stocked,
Mm. Yeah, true. That's a good point.
It's tough. But on the other hand, not every book costs $200 million to produce. So I think the excuse is variable, and that's not an apples to oranges comparison. Not to deride the point. I'm just saying the counter camp. The economics are a little fudgier with books.
Yeah, well, that's true. What are your favorite books, and what do you recommend?
That's tough. Well, I've already named a couple of books that I've read recently that I enjoyed. Norm Stuff, Tokyo Vice. I had to recommend other books. That's tough. I'm a super duper picky reader. I'd recommend, here's a fun one that still holds up, I think. And this is the book that got me into writing. This is when I realized, oh my God, think of the things I can get away with if I just call myself an author. All the demented thoughts I can put on paper. The Third Twin by Ken Follett. I read that in 8th grade. I don't know why my teacher had that on the shelf. She had all this other like really pleasant, mild stuff that was perfect for like middle school, Hunger Games and Great Gatsby and all those fun things. And then she had this book where the first chapter is just the point of view. It's a thriller, where the first chapter is just the point of view of a serial rapist. Him explaining why he does what he does. And like him rationalizing it, he's like, I got a friend who goes to a Payless shoe source and just watches women try on shoes. That's what gets him off. I don't see what's so cool about what I'm doing. And I'm so sorry, by the way. I know you mentioned you have nephews and nieces who watch this. I was in 8th grade when I read this, and I've yet to say a bad word. I'd like to think I'm covered. But that book, that opened my eyes. How old is the average person in 8th grade? Like
13?
Yeah, pretty young, 12, 13. So when I saw it, I'm like, this is crazy. You can put this on paper and people will pay you? So, yeah, that's a recommendation just for that first chapter. The rest of the book is fine, but it becomes a very pro forma thriller, like very by the numbers. Ken Follett is an established name. He's got a brand, and he's got a formula, right? He writes commercially. for, he's the airport novelist. He knows what sells. So he stops being crazy after that first chapter. But my God, is that a way to hook someone? That is just, it's bonkers. So yeah, that's fun one. People Who Eat Darkness is a book about serial killing in Japan, a nonfiction book about just one person and like the case that was investigated of a foreigner who came to Japan, was murdered, and then just the state of the police over there and how they don't really care about the fate of foreigners. And it's just a really interesting book, which ironically it barks up the same tree as Tokyo Vice. But I don't know. As you can tell with all these books, even Norm with like his excessively dark humor constantly and joking about drug overdosing and whatnot. These guys, I enjoy books that are saying things that most movies can't get away with saying, or that most traditionally published things can't get away with saying. I really enjoy authors who use their platform and their like ability to bully the publishing industry into letting them publish. They abuse that fact and they say things that just push the needle to a more daring place. So those would be my 4 recommendations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry again to any young viewers who are like, oh my God, maybe I've opened their eyes. Maybe they're going to read that and go, this is the best thing ever. This is crazy.
Yeah. Ken Follett. Okay, good to
He's
know.
a famous guy. I mean, like that name alone, if I had opened with it's a Ken Follett book, probably no one would bat an eyelash. But the fact that I exposed the first chapter first, that's the shocking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Just reading that as an 8th grader, like they can put this on paper.
Well, just going from like basically now that the publishing industry, like all middle grade books are the equivalent of Goodnight Moon. Going from that to that, it was like a seismic jump. I felt like Superman jumping between continents. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh, interesting.
I hope so. It's either that or appallingly offensive. So I try to straddle the line.
Well, I'll have to give it a read and see which camp I put it in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all I had. I guess the book is. Oh, wait a minute. By the way, as a side note, did you realize that you sent me a PDF that didn't have any page numbers?
Yes. I didn't realize you were going to print it out. The EPUB file, I figured the most palatable option would be the EPUB, since most people use like Kindle Previewer or some sort of Kindle app, and that builds in the page numbers. The PDF is a raw extract of that EPUB file. It was a conversion I made hastily for anyone who didn't have the app. The only version that's readable with page numbers was the print file for the physical, as you can see, like page number, all that was the print file, but that has page setting, right? So it like shifts the pages left and right. So I didn't know which one would be more visually distracting. I apologize if that was a giant oversight on my part. I just wanted something uniform and convenient.
No, it worked out because I printed it out and then I put it all together in a binder. So
wow,
there was no reason to keep track of which pages. I just never knew how much further I had to go.
That is impressive. Well, I mean, props to you for printing it out. I mean, I feel bad for the trees, but just my own ego like loves that. That's the other thing was I wasn't expecting anyone to print it out, so I figured because PDF readers have a built-in page counter that like saves where you are, I figured, okay, as they're scrolling, they'll see page 30 out of 280 something, But it never occurred to me this would happen. That is, I thought my Ken Follett summary was going to be the craziest thing on this, but that right there is awesome. That is like, hats off to you, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, I have not I've not adopted the e-reading anything. Basically, I read everything audio, so reading anything like non-audio, it has to be physical for me, like printed on ink. So
I fully understand that, and that is a popular thing. I didn't do, as I mentioned, this is my only self-published work, so I didn't want to front the gigantic cost to get a quality ebook like audio reader. And naturally, this is a comic, so you can't have an audio reader. But I will say this, the small publisher who put out Cold War 2395, there is an audiobook version of this. So yeah, they ponied up to get a nice J. Scott Bennett, I believe, is the audiobook reader. So yeah, they got a guy to read it in case you wanted a story told to you with a similar voice, just a completely different setting.
Oh, okay, yeah. Good to know.
Yeah. by all means, man, you can't stop an author from plugging his stuff. You know, it's like a cat to catnip.
Hey, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
What
I
I'm
really
here
appreciate
for.
you taking the time for this, by the way. This was great. It was a well-structured chat. I think we covered a lot of interesting stuff, and you had great questions. I appreciate it, you know?
Oh, well, I'm glad. Yeah. Hope the people who see it agree. But yeah, so I've watched a lot of author interviews, and I love the way that I love sitting through author interviews. Honestly, I like talking. I love hearing writers talk about how they think about things, how they construct things. This is it's fascinating to me. So yeah, I'm grateful you first of all sent the book, and second you were able to sit down with me tonight. Yeah, it's been fun.
I agree 100% on all counts. I'm grateful to you as well, and yeah, I'm happy we had this. This was good, and I look forward to your future interviews too. You got a fan for life.
All right. Well, vice versa. The book is Earth Game of the Year edition. So yeah, give it a check it out.